grandmother sued her daughter-in-law to gain custody of her grandchild. After that, daughter-in-law raised the child alone for 2 years since her husband passed away. Sounds absurd, right? But that's what happened to me. I'm Jessa, a single mother. I'm not rich, I don't have a good lawyer, I don't have anyone to back me. Just a 6-year-old and the love of motherhood. This is the story about the fight to get his son back. Not with money, but with truth. And what made the whole courtroom silent was a letter from Spider-Man's backpack. I never thought that one day my son would stand in the middle of a court. The boy was only 6 years old. Yet that morning when the judge said, "We are ready to make a verdict," that small hand clasped the folded piece of paper, tightly moving to the middle of the room as if he knew exactly what he was doing. "Your Honor," his voice rang out, small but clear. The room immediately went silent, as if someone had cut the power. I was stiff, my hands still clutching the edge of the table, my nails almost digging into the cold wood. My chest tightened, not because I was afraid, but because I knew this moment would change everything. My name is Jessa Carter, 33 years old. I work as a freelance designer, not rich, don't have a prestigious job, but I do a boy named Theo. The boy is all I have left. Before our lives used to be very simple. A 2-bedroom house located quietly on the edge of town where every morning I make coffee, take Theo to kindergarten, then come home and draw until evening. Not rich, not luxurious, but full of warmth. We once had a husband, a father, Aaron. He passed away 2 years ago. A car accident happened on a rainy day while I was cooking stir-fry that I never touched again after that. From that day on, I learned to stand strong because of Theo. I wake up early, I go to work, I laugh when my baby wakes up and cry when he falls asleep. There were days when I thought I was going to collapse, but then the boy would sit next to me on the sofa and softly say, "Mom, don't be sad, I'm here." So I tried again. But then there is Margot. My mother-in-law never liked me. From the beginning, she thought I was out of class, didn't know how to take care of children, was too soft and was too emotional. Aaron once said, "You will change." But she never changed. After he died, she came more often, bringing cakes, gifts, and needle-sweet sarcasm. "He needs more discipline. Why did you let him wear a red shirt and orange pants?" I tried to ignore it because I thought she was also heartbroken. But I was wrong. One day I caught her pushing a private school introduction handbook into Theo's hand. When I said I couldn't afford it, she just smiled softly and said, "Some environments are better for children. Not all mothers understand that." I started set limits. Clear visitation schedule, no teaching intervention, and at that moment she changed. No longer a worried mother-in-law, Margot became a fierce woman. Grandma sue me, request one full custody of Theo. She hired a top lawyer in the county and filed a petition claiming that I was financially incompetent, mentally unstable, and unable to guarantee my grandchildren's future. I clearly remember the day I received a white file with cold words printed on it, "Petition for custody." I sat down on the kitchen floor, my hands shaking. In the living room, Theo was still watching cartoons, completely unaware that in the near future, he might no longer be able to live with his mother. I used to think, if I was kind enough, patient enough, kind enough, no one would want to take my child away. But then there are still people who do it. That person is Margot, my mother-in-law, the only person left who shares Aaron's blood, but callously turned the shared pain into a weapon. I have no money. There are no good lawyers, no family support. There's just an old house, a few souvenir photos, a few emails from Theo's teacher, and a determination to not let anyone take away this mother-daughter bond. I called my sister Lena. It was 11 p.m. Her voice was hoarse with worry. "I keep calm. I'll come right away." An hour later, Lena showed up. She hugged me for a long time and then sat down to read the entire stack of papers, not once interrupted. When she finished reading, she just said, "She plays dirty Jessa, but I can't lose. I rented one public attorney because it's only enough to pay that amount. His name is Martin, a man in his 50s with dark circles under his eyes. and a voice as soft as the sound of rain. He didn't promise anything. Instructions: take notes on everything, preserve all evidence, and always stay calm in court. I started working like someone possessed. I put everything together. Photo of Theo smiling on the first day of school. The pediatrician's note confirmed that the baby is developing well. The teacher's email said he was a thoughtful child who likes to help his friends. Supermarket bills, letters even. The drawing Theo gave me with the squiggly text, "I love you the most in the universe." Every night I sit and arrange documents under the yellow light next to the TV, replaying old episodes of Friends just to keep my mind from exploding. As for Theo, every night he hugs the blanket and comes to me and whispers, "Mom, don't be sad, I'm here." He's 6 years old, but he feels it all. Already first court date arrive. I vividly remember Margot walking in with a dark dress designer handbag and eyes as sharp as knives. She smiled at Theo, but when she looked at me, there was unconcealed contempt in her eyes. Her lawyer, a sleek, expensive man, said every word clearly. The defendant is a freelancer with no stable income, no family support, and lives in a mental state that has not yet recovered from the loss. We believe that the boy needs a disciplined, stable environment without excessive emotions. I want to scream, emotions aren't a bad thing. I'm not spoiled just because I feel pain. But I sat still. Take a deep breath and remember Martin's words, keep calm. Calm is the language of the right. That evening, after showering and brushing his teeth, Theo turned to me, eyes filled with tears. "Mum, am I going to have to live in 2 houses like Tommy's friend? I don't know how to answer." "I'm just saying, no child. Mum is just handling adult business. Then everything will be fine." I lied, because I'm not sure. But in Theo's eyes at that time, I was still a trustworthy person. Margot hasn't stopped yet. A week later, I got it. Child Protective Services called at the door. An anonymous complaint said I left my children home alone to go to work. I gasped. In the meantime, I was in an online meeting with a client and Theo was sitting next to me building Lego. I led the staff around the house, showed rooms, opened the refrigerator and gave doctor and teacher information. She nodded slightly and said she would report back. But the coldness in her eyes made me know this war has been unfair for a long time. That night I sat, holding a pile of unfolded laundry, cried until my chest was choked, and then Theo walked in and placed a painting on my lap. 2 matchsticks drawing hands holding hands. On the roof are scrawled the words, "Me and Mummy forever." I don't know where it will go yet, but I know this: I don't surrender. Not for anyone. But because one boy believed in me, even when the whole world was skeptical, I used to think the worst was over. The morning I received the news of my husband's death, the first night I lay alone holding my child with no one to turn to and ask, "Are you okay today?" But no. The feeling standing in the middle of the courtroom listening to others analyse their mistakes, like an erroneous financial report, really made me understand there are wars where no bullets are fired, but are as painful as being stabbed in the heart. The judge asked, "Miss Carter, you are currently working unstable freelance jobs, have no relatives nearby to support you, and are being treated for an anxiety disorder, correct?" I swallowed. Nod slightly. On the other side, Margot sat up straight, her lips pursed into a winning smile. Her lawyer continued, "We do not deny that she loves her son, but love cannot be replaced stable. And according to the records, the boy will have better studying, living and psychological support conditions when living with Mrs. Langston, who is willing to pay for the best services, including tutors, coordinators, and professional psychological care." I clenched my fists. Don't cry, don't beg. Just say, "I don't have much, but I have time, I have patience, I have evenings where I tell stories to my children. I have a shirt my child likes to wear when he's scared, and my arms are warm enough for him to sleep well every night." My voice trembles, but I'm still standing. I showed each file of evidence, emails from teachers, photos of activities, academic records, health certificates. Not fancy, not tactical, just a mother trying to prove I am good enough. When the trial adjourned, I took Theo out into the hallway. It's silent, then suddenly asked, "Mum, if I tell the court I want to stay with you, will they listen?" I stopped. Some adults don't always pay attention to the little things. He looked at me, his eyes strangely determined for a child. "I will write. If you don't say it, who knows what you're thinking?" That evening, as I sat scratching my head and preparing my next defence, Theo was in the corner of the room, write a letter. A student paper, green ink, childish crooked handwriting. He folded it carefully, put it in an old Spider-Man backpack and said, "Mom, you don't need to read. I just brought just in case." I was about to say, "No need, the court doesn't let children speak." But then, me don't say. I looked into its eyes. There was no confusion in those eyes, only faith, something that even the legal system cannot create, nor can it extinguish. The day the final trial took place, the weather was overcast. I wear the oldest shirt that I feel luckiest with. Margot is still Margot, expensive dress, cold perfume. When her lawyers made their final presentation, it was clear to me they had the advantage. They have qualifications, data, and language that is precise to every comma. I just have truth, a truth full of scratches and fatigue, but true to the bone. Martin turned to me and nodded slightly. It's my turn to speak. I stood up, heart beating rapidly. I know I'm not perfect. I know I often forget to fold laundry or cry when I miss my husband. But I have never been absent from any of my children's vaccinations, parent meetings, or holidays. I can't buy branded shoes, but I know which toes hurt those little feet when it gets cold. I don't have a degree in child rearing, but I know my child is afraid of the dark, and I've learned how to turn on the light without waking him. The whole room was silent. Already, a small hand pulled my hand. It's Theo. He stood up, pulled out a folded piece of paper from his backpack. "Your Honour, let me tell you a little bit." Okay, I was dumbfounded, and the judge nodded. The whole courtroom seemed to freeze when Theo stepped into the middle. The boy's navy blue sweater covered most of his body. In his hand he held the student's paper folded in 4. He trembled slightly as he walked, but his steps were steady. "Your Honour, I wrote something for adults." A moment of silence. The judge, who had salt and pepper hair and determined eyes, bent down to look at it, gently asking, "What's your name?" "My name is Theo Carter, 6-year-old child. I like dinosaurs, like eating grilled cheese sandwiches, and like playing with Mum." I don't dare breathe. Margot was motionless, as if she couldn't believe what was really happening. The judge nodded. "Read it, child." Theo opened the paper. His tiny hand pressed it flat on the wooden table. The boy took a deep breath and began. "Mom gives me a hug when I'm sad. Mom cooks pancakes on Sunday and lets me pour the syrup, even though I tend to spill it. Mum smiles at me even when I tell sad jokes. I listen to every sentence. Each word is like a knife, both sweet and warm. When you have nightmares, I let you sleep with me. Mom called me small heart. Sometimes we miss our dad and cry together, but then Mom told stories about Dad lit candles and said that it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be happy again. Mom said being soft-hearted is not bad. Then it raised its head, its eyes looking straight at the judge. I know Grandma loves me. But she said my mother was weak. I don't think being soft is bad. I want to be with someone who makes me feel like a child. The whole courtroom was as quiet as a sheet of paper. 1 second, 2 seconds, then many seconds passed without anyone moving. Margot bowed her head. As for me, I can only look at my child, don't dare, blink. I just want everyone to know that. Thank. He folded the paper and walked slowly towards me. I hugged my child tightly, filled with a strange feeling between fear and pride. The judge leaned back in his chair, hands clasped under his chin. Didn't say anything for a long time. Then he spoke. The court noted the voluntary statement of baby Theo Carter. Although young children are not normally encouraged to speak in court, this statement demonstrates deep awareness of emotions and living environment, and we take that seriously. When I heard that my body felt hot, then he turned to lawyer Margot. After reviewing the records, I found no evidence of abuse or hazardous living conditions at Ms. Carter's home. Every medical, academic, and social assessment shows the child stable and well developed. Margot was about to say something, but the judge raised his hand. And finally, the wishes of the child himself, even if he is young, also show one thing clearly. The boy is being raised with love. Then he looked at me. His face softened. Ms. Carter, the court declared that she continued to have full and legal custody of her children. Visitation terms for Ms. Langston will be discussed in private mediation, but there are no grounds to change the current custody rights. I heard every word clearly, but it took a few seconds to understand I kept my child. My legs are weak, eyes blurred, but my hand still held Theo's hand tightly. We walked out of court passing Margot. She said nothing, just tightening the bag strap, eyes blank. I don't look at her, I don't need it, because at that moment I am living a moment that I will not forget for the rest of my life. Sunlight shines down on the courthouse steps. Theo looked up, smiled, and asked softly, "Mum, did I do well?" I knelt down and kissed her forehead. Not only did you do well, I saved my mother. The next day the house was still the same. Nothing has changed. The door still creaks when opened. The kitchen light was still flickering when I turned it on. The wooden chair next to the dining table still wobbles every time Theo climbs on it. And that's why everything remains unchanged, I just realized. My world was not broken. That morning, Theo still woke up early as usual. He flipped the blanket, rubbed his eyes, then crawled into the kitchen. "Mum, can I make cereal?" Its voice is clear. I nodded, stood still and looked at the familiar scene. The boy bent over and climbed onto the chair, clumsily pouring cereal into the bowl, milk spilling onto the table. I don't yell. I laugh because this is what I fought to keep. I wiped the milk and poured more for it, then turned to see yesterday's letter. The letter that Theo read in court. Okay, stick it neatly on the refrigerator with a dinosaur-shaped magnet. At the end of the letter, the word Theo Carter scribbled with red crayon. Next to it is one. The heart is as small as 2 crooked strokes. I stood there for a long time, eyes blurred, not because of sadness, but because, for the first time in many months, I feel seen, understood, enough. We don't have a celebration party, don't call anyone, don't do anything grand. We just went to the park, Old Park, where the swings are a bit rusty and the wooden benches are faded. I let Theo play as long as he wanted. The afternoon sun slanted across his hair, reflecting his grin as he rose into the air, clutching his leash. I sat still in the chair, holding the ice cream he forced me to buy, even though it wasn't dinner time yet. He ate half the tree and then gave me the rest. "Mum, eat. Mum, 1 today." I burst out laughing, choking up while eating. When he got home, he said, "Mum, can I call Dad tonight? I want to say something." For a long time now, we've had the habit of keeping Aaron's old number, even though there's no one on the other end of the line. Occasionally, I turn on the phone and let Theo whisper a few things. We call it that message to heaven. That night, I picked up the phone and gave it to my child. He put his ear to his ear and whispered softly, "Dad, today, the court said I can live with my mother. I have read the letter. You are very brave, just like my dad taught me." I turned away, couldn't hold back my tears. That night, after reading the story to Theo, I lay in my room. The lights were off, but my heart was still pounding. Not because of winning the case, but because for the first time I no longer feel alone. That 6-year-old boy, not just my son. It is, you remind me that true love doesn't need to be too big. Just be real. Margot hasn't been in contact since the day in court. But a few weeks later, I received a letter from the Party Court Mediation Centre, discussing visitation. I hesitated. Part of me is still angry, but then I looked at Theo, lying on the floor colouring a purple dinosaur wearing a superhero cape, and I thought, I don't teach him to be angry. I teach him how to exist without bitterness, so I agreed to let Margot visit, once a month with supervision. She never apologised. Don't give me an admission of error. But I don't need it either, because I had a much more important victory. I didn't become a bitter person. I did not turn this war into a permanent wound. I'm still intact. And freedom. Some nights I still wake up startled. I quietly got out of bed, bare feet, lightly stepping on the old wooden floor, and walked to the next room. Open the door quietly and breathe a sigh of relief. The boy is still there. Sleeping soundly, arms tightly holding an old stuffed tiger legs, loosely draped over the edge of the blanket, mouth slightly open as if dreaming a peaceful dream. I stood looking at it in the dark for a long time, because there's a part of me that still can't believe we made it through. That piece of legal paper cannot take away this motherly love. That I, a mother who thought she wasn't good enough, still here every day with you. As time passed, I gradually stopped counting my fears. I learned how to cook again. Not fancy dishes, but the dinner is simple but enough to make me smile every time it is served. I learned to forgive, not because anyone deserved it, but because of me want to live lightly. I learned to love myself. Even though I still forget my keys sometimes, I still scream when I'm too tired. Because I know a mother doesn't need to be perfect, she just needs to be present. And above all, I learned the most important thing. From my own son, weakness is not failure. Weakness is strength in its gentlest form. My child taught me that, with a handwritten letter, with a trusting look, and with a soft statement in the courtroom that day. I want to be with someone who makes me feel like a child. If you are watching this video and somewhere in your heart there are moments when you feel like you are not enough, remember, friend, are doing better than you think. You don't need to try hard to prove it. You just need keep loving with everything you've got, even if it's a simple meal. It's a hug when a child cries. It's the way you listen, even when you're tired. Because for me, that's enough. Thank you for listening to my story. If you feel touched, help spread this to more people like the video. It helps the algorithm know this is a story worth hearing. Share with someone who needs a ray of hope, a mother, father, or friend who is fighting in silence. Comment below. Tell me, have you ever been misjudged, and how did you get up? Don't forget to follow the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss out on true, profound, and memorable stories like this. From one heart to another, thank you for staying. We will meet again in stories that are very human, very real, like yourself.